Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this third webinar of the cycle of webinars dedicated to deepen our knowledge about unaccompanied young migrants arriving in Europe. We have the contribution of guests and experts telling us about the specific characteristics of some nationalities and specific profiles of young migrants. And countries of origin, and our guests helped us to know better this target of migrants, and they also support our work because we are always trying to lead these young people to an autonomous life. This webinar is part of the family-based care for children in migration, the FA.B. project. We coordinate partnerships of countries, Mediterranean countries, and that are working together to implement alternative forms of care, such as the family-based care of young minors, but also young adults. We are also trying to offer foster family as a possible solution. Today we are focusing on women, young women arriving in Europe. We will know more about their countries of origin. It is a phenomenon that has not the same figures as for men, for male migrants, and for this reason probably this target, unaccompanied female migrant, is a target a bit neglected, but we are involved in this project and it is our duty to know also about this target, and we should be fully committed to offer them the best possible assistance. It is important to understand who they are, why they start the journey, what kind of journey they choose, and what is their migration project when they arrive in Europe. Today, with us, we have the valuable contribution of Silvia Spinuso and Cheikh Gueye from OIM, which is the international organization for migration that you know very well. It is an intergovernmental organization working at the international level for migration. They offer humanitarian assistance, they promote humanitarian rights for the protection of the migrant rights. They work with migration policies and they collaborate with the major stakeholders, also institutional stakeholders and governments involved in this project. They deal with migration but also health issues and gender migration. Silvia Spinuso in particular, at the moment she is coordinating and she's collaborating with IOM and with the Minister for Social Policies in a project fully devoted to trace family, to family reunion and to the assistance of young migrants. And then Silvia, you will give additional information to our guests. And it is also important to remember the voluntary repatriation of our migrants, and it is important to remember that we should try suitable solution to support this target of migrants in Italy and in Europe. And Silvia collaborates with Cheikh Gueye, who is a cultural mediator working in the same project of family tracing and committed to find a solution to support unaccompanied young migrants in Italy and in Europe. In the second part of the webinar, we will have the valuable contribution of another guest. We are very happy to involve different stakeholders, and I'm referring in particular to the Fundación CEPAIM from Spain. They work with young migrants, asylum seekers, and they are committed to try to help these migrants in Spain to fight discrimination. They promote cultural integration between foreign migrants and autochthon citizens, and we will have with us Jesús María Fernández Sevilla Gomez, who work to support young migrants in Spain and within the project of CEPAIM. Welcome everyone, and I would like to start this webinar and to give the floor to Silvia and to Cheikh for the first part of our webinar. Then we will have a short debate through the question and answer session that you will find in the Zoom panel. Then we will have a short break, and then we will go on with the second part with Jesús María Fernández Sevilla and Fundación CEPAIM. And then after the session, another short debate, and then the conclusion. Enjoy the webinar.
You can see it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Alessandra, for the introduction and the presentation. Yeah. Just to complement what you were saying about IOM. IOM is, my name is Cheikh Gueye, just to clarify also my role within IOM Italy. I have a cultural mediator background, but I'm working as a project assistant alongside Silvia as a project assistant within the project family tracing and assessment, and in support to the Italian Labor Ministry, and our project aims to identify the durable solution for the unaccompanied migrants children. And the durable solution can be the integration in Italy, could be also a return in the country of origin. If the Italian juvenile court retained that the return in the country of origin is the best solution for the protection of the children. And another durable solution also could be the family reunification of the child with his family member in within the EU. Okay. And yes, IOM, I'm working with IOM, with Silvia. IOM is the leading intergovernmental organization in the field of migration, and work closely with governmental, intergovernmental, and non-governmental partners. And IOM has 175 member states, and a further 8 states holding observer status, and we have offices in over 100 countries. And I am dedicated to promote human and orderly migration for the benefit of all, then youth and underage included. And it does so by providing services and advice to government and migrants. IOM works in 4 broad areas of migration management, such as migration and development, facilitating migration, regulating migration, and enforcing migration. Today, we will talk about unaccompanied female migrant children and youth migrant women in Europe. And And we will highlight a focus on Italy and Spain with the support of Jesús from CEPAIM, Spain. Yeah, you can see it. You can see the next slide, right? No? Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I'm really sorry about this technical issue. Yeah, I'm really sorry. Then yeah, today we'll talk about these main topics in the course of the first hour, and that CEPAIM will follow with this presentation, and you will have a 10-minute break, a 10 minutes question and answer at the end of the presentation. Then we'll talk about, I will share some statistics on migration and trafficking in person, and I will talk about jointly with Silvia about unaccompanied migrants children migratory journey to Europe, and we'll focus on the Italian scenario and try to share with you some data and some information about the trend of female migrant women who arrive in Italy, and some evidences of trafficking patterns of female UMC on the move from Italy to Spain. And here is an interesting stat which is taken from the latest World Migration Report launched by IOM in December 2021. It refers to data and events until June 2021. Specifically, the graph is an overview of international migration presence from 2000 to 2020. And as you can see here, the share of female migrant has not changed significantly in the past 60 years. And however, in absolute number, more female migrants are migrating independently for work reason, for education, and as head of household. Despite this, they may face strong discrimination, and they may be exposed to, they are more vulnerable to mistreatment, and can both be or face double discrimination because they are migrant and they are women as well. And this doesn't mean that male migrants do not face this kind of issue during their migration journey. And the overview here over a 20-year span tells us also that the percentage of female migration in 20 years slightly diminished, whereas the percentage of male migrating had slightly increased. And for the female migrant trend, you can see less than 1.4 against 1.3 promedio for male migration, migration. And we believe that It is, however, important to underline that women and girls, including underage, do express their capacity of personal agency. That is to say, they are more and more able to actively make decisions about their future and build of their capacity of resiliency. And for this reason, for IOM, the participation of female and male underage as well on their own project and the process regarding them is very important. Sorry, and we believe, and nevertheless, this topic will not be the object of the presentation. I mean, the resiliency of female migrant underage will not be the object of the presentation, which will be instead will focus on the vulnerability and the risk of exploitation and abuse that, as we know, especially target women and girls. And what is important to underline here is that not only women and girls are victims of exploitation and abuse, but especially them are mostly exposed to it and at any leg of their migratory journey, and they could face it in the country of origin. They could also face it or be exposed with this kind of exploitation of abuse in the transit country and in the destination country as well. And for example, for your information, IOM Italy is working alongside the Italian labor inspectorate in order to contrast labor exploitation of migrants. More in detail, following our comment on the start, incorporate in IOM World Migrant Report of 2022, female migrants comprise somewhat less than 135 million, or the 48.1% of the global international migration stock, according to the UNDESA report of 2020. I really recommend you to have a look on that, to be aware of the number of female migrant and male migrant globally. And the share of female migrant has declined. It's very important to underline that from 29.4% in 2000 to 48.1% in 2020, whereas the proportion of male migrants grew from 50.6% in 2000 to 51.9% in 2020. And while looking at these stats, please be aware that conversely to what has been underlined as to the global trend, women and girls make up the majority of migrants in the East and Horn of Africa, 50.4% compared to men and boys. And most important, all they are more likely to be forcibly displaced, while men are more likely to migrate irregularly in search for employment opportunities. And overall, 1 in 4 migrant on the African continent reside in the region. And the reason why this person are displaced or are migrating irregularly in Europe or elsewhere, it's very important to mention the conflict and the insecurity, which remain the biggest drivers of displacement in the region. And as you know, we should take into consideration also the climate change, which is a main driver. As an example, the recent drought taking place mainly in Somalia, in Ethiopia, and in Kenya has also been a key factor driving migration and displacement, especially in the Africa region, in the East Africa region. And trafficking in person is also a matter of great concern with IOM, identifying 3,000 cases of trafficking from the region over the last decade. And most trafficked persons were identified as being from Kenya, Uganda, and Ethiopia. This is, in the global overview. We'll talk later about the Italian scenario and with our colleague Jesús, as I told you before, what is happening in Spain. And in this group of women trafficked, the most affected victims are the women represent the 78% compared to men and boys who represent only the 22%. And globally, estimation provided by the Global Data Hub on human being trafficked in 2020, more than 156,000 cases had been identified in more than 189 countries of exploitation. And I will give the floor to my colleague Silvia to go ahead with this fact. You're welcome.
Thank you, Cheikh, and I thank you. If you can also go ahead with the slides so that we have them full screen and I don't have to change with my presentation. Thank you very much.
Definitely.
Okay, thanks a lot. As my colleague Cheikh told you before, we don't want to forget about the resilience that girls and women migrants do hold, but at the same time we are very well aware that when we talk about migration concerning women and girls, we have unfortunately also to take in consideration the trafficking risks and the many exploitations they go through. Certainly you are aware that trafficking in persons is a serious human rights violation and a crime, which is defined in Article 3A of the UN Protocol to prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking in persons. Just for you to have a brief description of what it is in reality and what it means to be trafficked, we propose you a brief description and swear that we will be talking about concrete cases after, but we believe that this is important to share with you before. So what is trafficking in persons? It is the act of recruitment, transfer, transportation, harboring, or receipt of persons through means of, this is only if the victim is an adult, since for children, the only act and purpose suffice to define trafficking, through means of threat or use of force, deception, coercion, abuse of power, or of a position of vulnerability, abduction, fraud, giving or receiving of payments or benefits to achieve the consent of a person having control over another person. Concerning the purpose, exploitation includes at a minimum exploitation of the prostitution of others or other forms of sexual exploitations, forced labor or services, slavery or practices similar to slavery, servitude, or the removal of organs. Again, as said, when it comes to underage, to children, an act and the purpose of exploitation are sufficient for a crime to be considered as trafficking in persons. So this being said, sorry for the long definition, but it is really important to underline all its facets. We have to consider that, as colleague Cheikh was saying before, this unfortunately takes place, we can say, quite in every region of the world, in both ordinary times and in times of crisis. The non-causes include poverty and economic inequality, homelessness, structural or interpersonal violence, gender inequalities, armed conflict, and post-conflict factors. Trafficking manifests in multiple forms affecting women, girls, boys, and men who are exploited for servitude, domestic servitude, sex, forced labor, and forced marriage, among others. What it is important to underline now in a post-COVID-19 situation is that increased insecurity, poverty, and marginalization induced by the post-COVID situation and the outbreak of the virus can be drivers of human trafficking. The UN Office on Drugs and Crime underlined that the most dramatic implications have to be found in countries with highest and fastest increase in unemployment rates and for individuals with the lowest salaries. Adding to this, it is important to bear in mind that migrants in search for opportunities after having lost their job may fall prey of exploitative trafficking networks. More and more they fall prey through internet. And above all, in the absence of official and reliable safety nets, traffickers increasingly appear as the only last resort solution. This being said, next slide, please, Cheikh, thank you. For sure, I said the pandemic has further negatively impacted common livelihood strategies and led to increasingly restrictive, when not completely hostile, border regimes. So that the combination of reduced incomes and limited legal migration routes has encouraged migrants to take riskier and more hidden migration pathways. And this entailed increased risk of trafficking and sexual and or gender-based violence. And as we know, females being children or young females or even older females are more subject to this kind of violations and abuse. In turn, the pandemic-induced reduction in institutional presence, particularly referring to the lockdown periods, such as police, school, and healthcare, have indeed reduced opportunities for victim identification and limited survivor care. So that's the overall situation updated, as we said, to the post-COVID. And again, in line with what has been discussed, we will now take into consideration some highlights from the 2022 Counter-Trafficking Data Collaborative, which IOM has published together with the non-governmental organization Polaris, and which aims at publishing harmonized data from counter-trafficking organizations around the world. So as you can see it in the graph, more than 50% of the girls identified as victims of trafficking in persons are aged among 15-17 years old. And around 40% of male UMC are aged within the same age range. This is, of course, a huge number. And if you have a look at the other colors in the graph, you can easily see that even very small children have been identified as victims of trafficking. The extent of family involvement in trafficking in children is up to 4 times higher than what it is for adult trafficking. And this suggests the needs for more preventive efforts, specifically targeting children and their families. In addition, boys are more likely to be recruited by a family member than girls. But as we know, families are very much into the trafficking of girls. We will talk about it in details after, especially when it comes to trafficking for sexual purposes. Data also show that children are most likely to be coerced into trafficking through physical, sexual, and psychological abuse, while adults are more likely to be controlled, having their documents confiscated, or having someone exploit their irregular status in a foreign country. These details again show you how profound is the risk of exploitation, and how profound is the level of vulnerability that underage, and especially female underage, go through. Another recent qualitative research carried out by IOM Niamey, it is very recent, it's 2022, highlights that almost half of identified cases of child trafficking begin with some family member involvement. As I was saying before, when it comes to especially to trafficking for sexual exploitation, families of female underage seem to be very much involved. And this report, this recent report, stresses the fact that this involvement could also be unconscious. It is partly conscious and partly unconscious. Again, you might ask yourself, but how much do we know on the children which are in EU and which could be inter alia victim of trafficking? How many are there? And yeah, which is the proportion of them compared to the resident population? The following two statistics are taken from Eurostat, and the most important thing that I would underline from this slide is for you to have a look at the presence in the EU member states. There are 4 countries specifically, Spain, Italy, France, and Germany, that account for the majority of children who are not EU nationals and who are present on their territories. That being said, there is an age breakdown and of the children present in Europe, but let's say that the data have to be combined very carefully in order to have some precise information, and it's not even easy to combine them, given the fact that the status of children, even internally, meaning within the EU countries vary a lot. There are countries in which either you are an asylum seeker or you're staying on the territory irregularly, other countries in which you may stay even though you're not an asylum seeker. And among those, Italy and France and Spain, if I don't get wrong. So when it comes to counting the presence of female children, indeed it's and this stat shows the situation in Europe in November 2022, as far as female children are concerned. Numbers are really, it's really an underestimation, I would say. And in addition, there is an additional obstacle, as I was saying, in assessing the precise number, because of the fact that most probably many times those children are prey of trafficking nets. Sometimes they deny being underage in order to be able to better abscond from reception centers and therefore be ready to be moved inside the EU territory. And when we say that, of course, there is a trafficking net behind that. And there might be not only one final destination when it comes to exploitation of human beings and especially female human beings, so that we will see it after there is a sort of continuous and multiple exploitation, and that goes parallel to the movement, to the, let's call it, secondary movement of these children and young women inside Europe. So when it comes to the Italian scenario, as colleague Cheikh was announcing before, you will have to take into consideration that it is a very specific scenario. First of all, Italy fortunately holds a national statistic concerning how many children, unaccompanied children, are on its territory, where are they, which is their age, which is their sex, etc. And the statistic, the central system for that gathers this information is within the Ministry of Labour and Social Policies. It is the so-called SIM. This screenshot shows you the situation as of 31st of October of this year. And it is worth noticing that the main nationalities present in Italy and the ratio male-females has been completely overturned by the Ukrainian crisis. If you have a look, you want to have a look, and the internet side of the Ministry of Labour has all of these statistics of any statistic prior to 2022. You may very easily see that the percentages of female unaccompanied migrant children were very different from what you see on the screen now. And generally speaking, through the years, what you can see from the statistics is an accompanied male children presence of about 97%, 98%, sometimes 99%, and the rest accounting for unaccompanied female children. What we see here, as we said, has to do with the Ukrainian crisis and with the incoming of children from Ukraine, accompanied and unaccompanied. which is of course a phenomenon per se, which is completely linked to the war-torn situation in Ukraine. Historically, female UNC do not migrate alone, but rather they reunite with family members priorly residing in the country identified as final destination of the migration journey. And the nationalities, you've seen it on the screen. I didn't comment them, but just consider that besides from Ukraine, Egypt, Tunisia have always been on the first rank, and Albania, of course. Give the floor again to Cheikh.
Thank you so much, Silvia. And here you can see within the Italian scenario, and as Silvia has already said, usual statistics have been overturned by the war in Ukraine since February 2022, which caused 4.4 million migrant refugees fleeing Ukraine and 7 million internally displaced persons in Ukraine. And before that, former UMC were only a very small percentage of the total number of UMC hosted in Italian territory. And as you can see here, data speaks for themselves, as the proportion of Ukrainian formal UMC equals 87.6% of the total. Some overtone has to do with also the age range as well, where formal UMC as male UMC have always been included in the age between 15 to 17 years old, and not 14 years old. And this has to do with the fact that the male UMC are usually adolescent aged between 15 and 17 years old, who are often driven in their migration choices as consequences of a family venture, the decision of the family. They often stand as the new breadwinner for the families, and then being often the eldest male child in the family. Then it's very important to take into account that the family can represent a protective factor for the UMC, but the family can as well represent a risk factor for the UMC who migrate. Actually, Italy is hosting 165,000 people holding a temporary protection, and 117,000 are women, and 46,000 are men. And this update is as of November 2022. You can find this data in the website of the Protezione Civile, Italian Protezione Civile. It's also important to underline here, looking at this data, especially as for UMC victims of trafficking. Data and reports stress the key role of the family, which are often involved in the trafficking of these children. We'll talk about that later with Jesús. Here I will give again the floor to Silvia in order to go deeply on this topic. Silvia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cheikh. So, what was the migratory scenario in Italy until a few years back, prior to the pandemic and before the war in Ukraine? As we were saying before, and we took as an example statistics dating back to December 2021, but we could have taken even a different period. It doesn't change much. The presence of female and unaccompanied migrant children was really very residual. 2%, 3% of the total number of unaccompanied migrant children in Italy. The main nationalities were, of course, not the Ukrainian one, but mainly Cote d'Ivoire, Somalia, Eritrea, Albania, and Nigeria. And especially when it comes to female unaccompanied children and also young adults coming from Cote d'Ivoire and Nigeria. There is a very well-proved link of trafficking of the majority of these children and young women coming from these two countries, especially for sexual exploitation. And all in all, if we have a look, again, I invite you to, if you are curious and you want to have some more details on how things were back in Italy 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, and so on. This phenomenon, particularly the phenomenon of Nigerian unaccompanied migrant children, has been ramping up for years. And of course, when we talk about how they arrived in Italy at that time, some years back, it was mainly, of course, through irregular and mostly all through irregular migration via the central or western Mediterranean routes. And they were typically, as regards Italy, typically arriving, landing in Lampedusa, but not only there. Then, more or less after 2017, this number has decreased in a substantial way. So, what changed in the migration routes and trafficking partners, or specifically Nigerian female unaccompanied migrant children? Those that you'll see listed here are hypotheses, but some are more than hypotheses, are facts and corroborated by facts and research and reports. In any case, most probably and quite surely, I would say, all of these factors interrelate and make up for the explanation of the big question we are posing ourselves: where do they are? Where do they go now, these children? So we may think about, in one way, we see them coming less and arriving less in our territory. We may think about increased capacities of authorities of European countries to better identify victims and put them in place more efficient referral mechanism, or enhance cooperation with Nigerian authorities, and or about the standpoints that in time have been adopted by local authorities in Nigeria. It is, many of you might know about the Oba of Benin City that revoked voodoo courses some time ago. And voodoo courses are very much into the trafficking procedure of these children that are obliged, even through voodoo rituals, to obey to the pact, let's call it pact, with the traffickers. But it has to be noticed, in 2021, we also always refer to IOM World Migration Report 2022, 178 states have become party to the trafficking protocol. So this is a very good news, and which by the way has achieved, we can say, almost universal ratification. But that said, there remain significant differences among EU countries and other countries in the world, of course, as to the full compliance with the minimum standards to combat trafficking. Just for your information, and we invite you to have a look at these reports, and the American Department of State publishes a report on trafficking. Just for your information, Italy is tier 2 as Nigeria. Instead, Spain is better placed and is recognized as completely complying with the minimum standards to combat trafficking, and it's classified as tier 1. As for Spain, although the government meets these minimum standards, investigations have been decreasing compared to the year prior to the report. I'm referring to US Department of State report 2022. So that we might say gaps remain in victim identification protocols, including a continued lack of adequate mechanism for identifying potential victims of trafficking among the asylum seeker and undocumented migrant population. So it's the scenario is, as you might well understand, moving. What I was saying before regarding the enhanced cooperation with Nigerian authorities, the US Department of State recognizes that Nigeria has made significant efforts in combating trafficking crimes inside its territory, of course, including doing more investigation, investigating more traffickers, and initiating more investigation activities. Nevertheless, it's not enough still. And yes, last but not least, the Nigerian organized crime has better adapted to the various national EU context. And when we say better adapted, it means that the various nets, trafficking nets present and operating in Europe have found better trafficking routes, better way of being able to transport persons trafficked where they want them to stay. And as I was saying before, it's not just one trafficking at a time, it become a sort of multiple trafficking in multiple places. And yeah, thank you, Cheikh. There are, of course, there is a lot of talking about this even on the newspapers, and I invite you to have a look if you're interested in the topic, at what is going on, not only in your country of origin, but also in the neighboring country. Still, last but not least, among all, some of those trafficked children, unaccompanied, especially unaccompanied female children, and especially Nigerian, but not only Nigerian, also Cote d'Ivoire and other nationalities. During the COVID-19 breakout, those that are and were already on the route to Europe might have been forced to remain longer periods in transit countries, for example, Niger or Libya. At first due to travel restrictions, and then due to the economic fallouts, consequences of the pandemic. And this, of course, has impacted what we see here in terms of number of trafficked unaccompanied migrant children coming to Europe. And the economic consequences, particularly the fallout of the pandemic, has affected migrants' capacity to earn and pay for the following leg of the journey on one side. And as said, has made them remain trapped in transit countries by traffickers who found, even in transit countries, a way to exploit them. Yeah, thank you, Cheikh. Next slide. Just for you to have an example of what's going on in Spain and to start prepare the floor for what Jesús will later tell you. And just for you to have an idea of how these routes continuously change and how one nation and one territory is linked to another, unfortunately for trafficking reasons. The Court of Madrid has been recently sentencing some trafficking nets that had been operating in Spain since 2014. And many of the testimonies are coming from, especially from Nigerian women and underage, made it clear that their forced entry point would have been Italy. And many of them have traveled and remained on the route for even 4 years. So consider that some may have come to Italy and then to Spain as 18 or over, but they have been exploited and trafficked even before. So, but the main point is here is to underline that they have been through Italy and then through, as you can read, a series of very well structured, let's say, systems of traveling. They have been brought to Spain. Many of them to end up in forced prostitution, and Jesús will tell you about other aspects of this presence in Spain. Again, it's we propose here to have a look at what a recent report of Spanish NGO MPDL underlines. It's a report done collecting qualitative interviews with former victims / survivors of human trafficking, and many of them of Nigerian nationality. What it is important to underline is that thanks to and caused by the closer and more active work carried out by Spanish authorities in intercepting ships and dinghies arriving in Spain from Morocco, which is the other route of the Mediterranean. The alternative was chosen through Libya, has made UMC and young Nigerian female migrants arrive in Italy and from there travel to Spain and other EU countries. The report also compares the most common trafficking route, which was, as I said before, through Niger and Mali as a transit country, and then proceeding through Morocco, to what has been underlined here, meaning that there is always, unfortunately, a way that the traffickers find in order to choose the best route, and unfortunately being succeeding in exploiting these girls and young women in Europe. Yeah, Cheikh, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Here are some takeaways. What we have to bear in mind is that although female UMC share with male UMC and vulnerability factors, the acquired vulnerability for female UMC have a much greater negative impact. And some example of inner vulnerability factors are household deprivation, very low level of literacy, previous exposure to exploitation. Then it's very important to take into account, the risk of vulnerability from the country of origin, and often child labor in the context of origin acquired vulnerabilities. We mean all those that children can be subject to during the migration journey. And the second takeaway is UMC families are very often directly involved in the trafficking of children, both intentionally and unintentionally, especially as regard female UMC. Those meaning that they are subject to the control of powerful criminal organization, and the family, as we have said before, can represent here a risk factor for the UMC. And the third takeaway is that among UMC, mostly travel to Europe through harrowing journeys. Female sub-Saharan UMC and especially Nigerians are the most subject to trafficking and exploitation. And as far as the first we have said, in the first takeaway is concerned, please bear in mind that those get even worse for female UMC through the migratory journey, the later and more subject than male UMC to a risk of exploitation and abuse. This does not mean that male UMC can be subject or can be victims of exploitation and abuse. Thank you so much for your attention. And now we have 10 minutes, then you can ask your question. And please feel free to send a message through the chat or raise your hand. Then the floor is yours, finally. We have spoke a lot. And thank you so much again for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cheikh, and thank you, Silvia, for this presentation. There is an observation rather than a question in the chat, and it is a very interesting story told by Sabrina Ifyonai, daughter of a Nigerian woman that arrived in Italy and that was involved in prostitution. The title of this book, telling the story, is To God Tomorrow, if I have understood correctly the title. And it is important to underline that the area of Castelvolturno in the south of Italy, it's an area where there is a strong concentration of migrants and often also trafficker. And I have a question for you. What is the way, or what are the ways in which you can intercept and identify situation of abuse or exploitation, and how can you work to help these people to reach autonomy and to support these young women, young girls? The younger the worse, I think. I think it is very complicated to work with very young migrants. So it is interesting to have your contribution on that.
Grazie mille, Alessandra. Do I have to respond in Italian or in English?
No, in English or whatever you come preferisci.
Grazie mille Alessandra per questa domanda. Thank you, Alessandra, for this question about the way we approach the potential victims of trafficking or exploitation. Well, as for sexual exploitation, IOM is working and has worked for several years in the point of disembarkment, supporting the authorities in the identification of these victims of sexual exploitation, and the added value in doing this is the coordination with the other agencies, collaborating and working in these places, in the points of arrival, and the involvement of cultural mediator. For example, in Sicily, IOM gave a huge contribution in coordinating operative procedure, and every agency had a specific role clearly defined, and IOM had the task to identify the victims of trafficking. And as Silvia was saying before, very often minors, young Nigerian minors, denied to be minors, to be underage. And I remember that at that time we also involved Save the Children and many cultural and linguistic mediators, and also with the involvement of ASP. We distributed information. We asked information about the age, the date of birth, and explaining these young girls about the existence of a protection system in Italy for the potential victims of trafficking or exploitation. In carrying out this job, we faced several challenges. In most of the cases, the trafficker was also the person who was accompanying the migrant. And of course, we clearly perceive that these migrants were threatened. And so it is important to create a setting that can guarantee a relationship based on trust. So we should make clear that if these people decided to collaborate with us, we could guide them towards the services that can take care of them and that have the mandate to protect them and to protect the possible victims of trafficking. And we also involve linguistic and cultural mediator because we have to consider cultural elements. If we identify cultural elements, we have a better communication, a more sensitive and sensible approach. So IOM try to guarantee security in the setting, coordination with the other agencies, and great attention paid to the communication with the potential victims. As for labor exploitation, most of the time the victims are male minors in transition to the adult age, or they are about to become adult, and we know that in that age there is the risk to lose the protection, to lose the support by the services. And since they run the risk to be without documents, they become prey, they become victims. And IOM, in collaboration with the Ministry of Labor and Social Policies, tries to increase awareness and disseminate prevention guidelines to prevent labor exploitation. We talk about the right of work. We talk about the exploitation of work, which is a very Western concept, most of the time totally unknown by the person. But if we have a great team made of cultural mediators, we can adopt an easy approach to give information in a clear and simple way. And we are able to explain what is labor exploitation and why these people could be supported, could be helped. And again, we are facing challenges. For example, to belong to the same community, for a cultural mediator belonging to a community, and if the community is the same as the community of the migrant, in these cases, it can be difficult to create a relationship of trust. Because sometimes there is a conflict with the community they belong to. Family can be a protective factor, as we said before, but at the same time, they can be a risk factor. But you can be fully aware of this only if you can listen to the victim, if you can talk to them. Listening is key, talking is key, understanding their worries, understanding what they are experiencing, and most of all, organizing coordinated work with the other agencies. I hope to have been exhaustive. Time is running, and I would like to give the floor to Jesús. Just one question, and I kindly ask you to be brief. It is difficult to answer briefly to this question, but I think it is worth asking you.
I not understand, but the women wrote is only a traffic for human. Credo ecco che la domanda sia proprio la migrazione femminile è costituita solo dal traffico di esseri umani.
Human migration is just made of human trafficking. Thank you, Alessandra. We have underlined it at the very beginning. We don't want to exclude female migration as a whole and the strength of migrant women, because we know that in terms of absolute number, they are most of the time they have the role of head of the family. They have to migrate to support their families in their countries of origin. But it is also true that when we talk about female migration, and especially minors migration, we have to talk about the vulnerabilities these young minors may face. So this was a mandatory premises. Otherwise, we would have completely changed the focus. And we are not talking about the new female migration, female empowerment. It is a completely different topic. Woman does not mean trafficking, but women are victims of trafficking and they are more vulnerable. Thank you for clarifying that, because this is a key concept to convey. Thank you very much for your presentation. Just a 3-minute break to drink a glass of water and to be here again with Jesús Fernández for the second part of the presentation. Thank you. We are ready to resume. Sorry for this very, very short break.
Esattamente, sì, questi pochi minuti di pausa, ma il tempo vola e quindi do subito
we are running out of
la
time, and
parola
so I
al
would like to
nostro
give the floor to
ultimo
our
ospite,
guest.
ringraziandolo della
Jesús, thank you
partecipazione a
for being
questo
here.
webinar, Jesús Fernández de Sevilla Gómez, della Fondazione CEPAIM.
Buongiorno a tutti, Calimera, buenos días, good morning, everybody. Thanks, Alexandra and Cidis for your invitation. Also to Cheikh and Silvia for your great contribution. I would like to go quickly on my presentation. I come from Fundación CEPAIM in Spain. And first of all, I would like to ask for apologies because we are going to talk about young migrant women. And I'm not a migrant currently, I'm not a woman, and formally I'm not young. So we would like to give the voice to the protagonists of this of the topic that we are going to talk about today. But I have prepared my presentation with the Gender and Equality Department of CEPAIM to give this intersectional approach to our presentation. I will introduce briefly the foundation, and we were talking about youth care leaver, women youth care leaver, women that arrives in Spain when they are under 18, and but we will be focused on their lives after 18. What happened with this woman migrant and the way that we approach to them and the way that we work with them. The last part of my presentation will be a study case, a research that we made a couple of years ago, and we will be focused on, as Silvia and Cheikh did, on this situation with Nigerian and Equatorial Guinea women in Spain. As I told you, this brief presentation, just to say that we are an NGO. We are collaborating with national, regional, local, and international administration. We started to work in Fundación CEPAIM in 28 years ago when Spain started to receive migration. Traditionally, Spain was a push country. The Spaniards migrate to Latin America mainly, and also to some countries in North Europe. But in the 90s, at the end of the 90s, we start to receive without a structure, without organizations, and so the citizenship start to organize themselves to receive these migrants in different parts of Spain, and after that we became a big organization working for foster the social cohesion and coexistence. As you can see in our logo, Fundación CEPAIM Convive. Convive is coexistence, so is our main focus to work in this intercultural coexistence. The mission of Fundación CEPAIM is to work for an inclusive society, to facilitate full access to human rights. And this is a main point, a key factor, the human rights approach to all our intervention, our daily work, to be clear about the human rights vulnerabilities that the people which we are working with suffer. We work with the most vulnerable people in our society. Initially, as I told you before, we were working just with migrant people, but after the crisis of 2008, we changed our point of view, and now we are working on a territorial basis, not just with migrant people. We're working with community, with neighborhood, with cities, small towns, but with vulnerable people, not just with migrants. This is the main values that inspire our social actions, that are interculturality at the beginning. We are not defending other ways like assimilation or multiculturality. We believe in an intercultural societies in which all the parts present living in the territories can decide the main culture that we are living in. We also believe in the gender equality, solidarity, social justice, engagement, and this is one of the main points: the equal treatment, non-discrimination, and the management of cultural diversity. We are a big organization. We have offices in 35 points. We have just recently opened an office in Canary Islands. This is one of the main points of arrival of migrants from Africa. We are almost in all the regions of Spain, and there's another fact, like we were attending 34,000 people in 2021. We are part of some networks. I will just highlight that we have get recently, 1 year ago, the highest status in the United Nations Economic and Social Council, and now we have this consultative status. But we are also working with European Anti-Poverty Network, the European Network for Statelessness, and also Nationals Network. This is one of our main points of action. Just to say that CEPAIM is divided, that Alexandra told at the beginning, that we are divided in 8 areas that are interconnected. But one of our main areas of action is the international protection and reception, working with refugees and with all migrants just arriving in our coast. We are working also in rural development and demographic challenge in Spain. As you know, it's a big problem in our agendas. The territories that are losing population every year, and we are working and trying to connect this reality with the reality that migration adds to our country. Also, employment and training. This is another important area. Equality, non-discrimination, and intersectionality. The area that we prepared this presentation together. Another important department area in CEPAIM is this coexistence, interculturality, and community development. As I told you, all the areas are connected. We are trying to include all this point of view in our daily action, our projects, our activities. Communitary approach, equality, this rural development, some areas, some topic that we include. I own to the social educational intervention with children, youth, and families. Specifically, I'm working on this youth department, in which we are working with transition to adulthood from mainly immigrants youth after they feel 18. So we will go deep in this topic, but just to say that urban agenda and residential inclusion, in this topic we are working with shanty towns, rural and urban shanty towns. So also, we have some offices in Senegal and in Morocco, in which we are working with development cooperation and co-development. This area that about intervention with minors, youth, and families, we have different objectives. And just to say that with youth care leavers, we are working in an integral approach. We try to work with them all the dimension of the inclusion. And also we include this communitary approach wave of intervention, and trying to include different parts of societies in the inclusion process and on the transition to adulthood process. Sorry if I'm going too quickly. The second point of this presentation is trying to explain what we are doing with Youth Care Leader. Youth Care Leader is another label that works for us, but maybe not for the youths. But we consider youth care leavers people over 18 who have been under the care of the public administration and who have been declared destitute during their majority. The previous webinars I was assisting on to the session that Mr. Cabrera did, and he gave all the important facts about this reality for youth care leavers, for minors, migrants, and they gave all the facts, all the statistics. So I will try to focus on the intervention that we did with youth care leaver, and also some specific research. Just to say about these youth care leavers, they came when they are minors, mainly from Morocco. In general numbers, just 12% of the foreign minors that arrive in Spain, only 12% are women. But in general, these suffer a specific violence. They have a special vulnerability just for being women. We will see later the details. But in general, they have complex life trajectories, low levels of education and employability, higher rates of exclusion, and early emancipation processes. When we work with them, in different communities, maybe we have from 1 to 3 years just to work on the emancipation process. In Spain, the emancipation age is 29 years old, so the Spaniards leave their familiar houses with 29. But for people who has been declared destitute and have been under the public administration care, we ask them to be independent, to be emancipated with 18 or 19 or 21st years old as late. So taking in account that the special vulnerability that they have. In Spain, every year, around 4,000 youngs leave the centers, and there are no places enough for attending all of them. Maybe around 53% of the young people find a place to continue with this process. What I mean find a place ruled by NGOs or public administration. Only 53%. With this 57%, more than 70% are men, and from the other 30% that are women, we have detected that 14% have minors in their care. We can say that most of the women's can also from Morocco and North Africa, but we have detected also some depression, but the facts, we have a lack of information. We will see later this lack of information that we have about women. But for example, coming from sub-Saharan Africa, is around 3% of the women that we have in these centers. A dramatic 10% of the young people after leaves the minor centers goes directly to the street. They don't find a proper place to stay, and we can see this dramatic situation in the big cities, Madrid, Barcelona, Valencia. We can see the presence of these young people in the street, and this presence has been highlighted by the media, and also for the extreme right parties that are making bad politics, using minors and young people as the center of the problem that our country has. As I told you, mainly Moroccan. These the people that we are receiving, the minors, men's and women's, and mainly from Morocco. We make in 2021 a research getting information about these youth care leavers and how is the present in the territory, in the different territories in Spain, and we get a few conclusions regarding female migrant women. Just we detected this lack of information regarding women, but we know that frontiers, border areas that can be in Catalonian border with France, also the border with Africa in the cities of Ceuta and Melilla, also in South Spain, the borders increase the risk of vulnerability for women associated to prostitution and sexual abuse. The stigmas, the gender barriers for women also may make more difficult the access to employment, to regularized employment. Also, the access to the right for health may be conditioned by gender stereotypes that since disorder or disease according to sex. I mean, specific illness for women are treated by the public system in a very general way, not in a specific point of view for attending the specific disorders or diseases that women could have. This is another obstacle to access to the right to health. Also, another of the conclusion of this research that searching for a known place, we call it, is the increased emotional dependency of girls that can lead to violence relationship or toxic relationship. The abusive situation that they can suffer during their minority or on the early years of adulthood can condition their future relationships. As Cheikh and Silvia told previously, the young female care leavers suffer threefold and intersectionality discrimination because they are young, because they are women, because they have been declared destitute, and when they are immigrant, in the intersectionality of the discrimination absolutely difficult the access to their rights. When this 14% of the young migrant woman who has children under their care obviously has even greater difficulties for participatory processes and for access to the other rights that we have. The communitary approach in which we believe in Fundación CEPAIM is trying to include the society in the inclusion process. We have detected that if you are working just with youngs, with families, with minors, with vulnerable people, if you are just working with them, you can get absolutely good results, education, cares, work, good health, etc. But if you are not working with the neighborhood, the inclusion is not possible. So we detected that just working with the vulnerable people don't facilitate the access to the society. We have to work also with the other actors involved in the territories. In the territories. So specifically, when we work with young people, we try to include the neighborhood and youth associations. We also try to include the local media in order to not to facilitate this hate speech, and try to give news with a right approach, trying to include and not discriminate these vulnerable people. We are working also with public administration, trying to sit the public administration technician and political parts, trying to sit in the same table, in the same spaces with youth, with neighborhood, with the other actors that are involved in our intervention. Absolutely, NGOs and other social entities on the territory, but also the business, the entrepreneurship, the local companies and business has to be involved in the development of the community and the vulnerable people. They are crucial also for the inclusion process. Formal and non-formal education center, we try to create these spaces for decide together, for try to understand the point of view of the others, and also to make a friendship relationship. When we are sitting together, the discrimination point of view that we could have absolutely decrease, because we are sitting together, we are seeing the eyes of the other people. And can happen unexpected situation that we are not maybe programming this situation, but when we are sitting together, talking together, thinking together, we open new possibilities for the people. Also, an organized citizenship is welcome to these spaces, and public and private professionals. In 2023, we are going to start a new project that is designed actually. We will be in different regions. And the idea is to put in the center to feel that the protagonist of these new groups will be the female migrant care leavers, and we will try to invite all these organization projects, agents, but while focuses on mental health and employment. So we will create in different cities of these regions. We will invite, we will detect at the beginning. As I told you, there is a lack of information regarding these women. We will try to detect them, to be close to different organizations, and to create group to dynamize these groups, just to taking their own decisions regarding access to mental health and right to mental health resources, and also to employment. We think that they are very well connected. And we will try to generate together these proposals and best practices between territories and a national level to in the work that we will be doing during the next years in these groups that we will be dynamized by psychologists and also to employment facilitators, and also with community dynamizers. We will be working with these groups of women. Absolutely, we will invite other women's, other associations, other entities to work together. This is a typical project of Fundación CEPAIM, trying to open the intervention to other actors and making the protagonists of the group to decide the new steps, in which way they can go ahead, and facilitating them the access to their rights. The third part of this presentation is the case. I will try to continue the line that Silvia and Cheikh exposed about these Nigerian and Equatorial Guinea young women in Spain. This presentation comes from another research that we did in 2021 regarding women in shanty towns, in informal settlements in Spain. In this research, that was also a participatory research, we were focused on residential exclusions, but also in the 8th dimension for social exclusion: participation, health, employment, economic issues, education. I have all the dimension there. Sorry, because I'm going too quickly, trying to be on time. But the 8th dimension that we consider important for the inclusion. We were talking with women, with key informers, mainly with women and experts about all these topics. This research was made in Almeria and Huelva, that is rural settlement, rural shanty towns, and Barcelona in Madrid, that what we consider vertical shanty towns. We were talking about this exclusion, vulnerability, and inclusion axis. And absolutely, we try to include this gender and communitary approach that we are proud of it. During this research, we received the visit in Spain of the special rapporteur on extreme poverty for United Nations, and we were really surprised or about their declaration, because he said that he has seen some situation in Spain that hasn't seen in other parts of the world. They remind the situation in some rural areas of Spain to the situation in Bangladesh, India, or etc. But he couldn't imagine that this situation could be part of Europe. I know we have been talking about that with Silvia and Cheikh, that also in Italy you have these same problems about shanty towns connected to agricultural development, but we have seen that close to this agricultural development there are vulnerability of rights for people, especially for women. In this research, we detected some profiles in the most of them, as you can see in this slide, comes from Morocco, just for women. The research was just focused on women living in shanty towns in these cities. The three first ones, come from Morocco. They are in Almeria. You can see the age from 25 to 40 years. The civil state, if they are married or separated, if they have children or not. the documentation, if they are regularly living here or not. We see some cases that they are living regularly in Spain. The occupation, the studies level, and the chronification status in the rural settlement. All these women, we try to consider how are the point of exclusion, vulnerability, or inclusion according to this 8 dimension. And we conclude that this profile H3 from sub-Saharan Africa and from Maghreb was the most vulnerable of all of them. So we were talking about this Nigeria, Guinea Equatorial, Guinea Conakry, and Ghana, women living in rural settlements. We can talk about the other profiles detected, but I think that this is we get quite valuable information making interviews with specialists. And this profile from Nigeria and Equatorial Guinea, the situation that we found mainly in Huelva, that is the place in which we make these interviews. The age of these women is 20 to 35 years old. They come from the most of them, they come when they are minors or just 18. They came from the Strait of Gibraltar route by road boat. They don't have no documentation to reside and work in Spain. And we have seen that they have high mobility. So it's quite difficult to get access to them because they have been moving all around Spain. We will see the main places every time. They are moving every time. They are prostituted by the treatment networks, and occasionally they can work also in agriculture. The high mobility responds to the agricultural seasons. So they go when the men's working are, the migrants' men's are, the treatment network moves the young women's to this point. What we detected is that they not usually have any partner or husband, neither children, but in some specific case they have children, and they leave the children in the city of Seville, and they continue this route for all around Spain. We will see this topic quite quickly, but we will see all this point in this part. Just to say that the city in which we have been detected the presence of these women is, as I told you, they come to Spain from the Gibraltar Strait, and they goes at the beginning to the south of Spain, Almería, Málaga, or Huelva. They have a liaison person that receive them in these cities and move them to the place in which they are going to work and to live. As I told you, Sevilla is one of the bases or the focal points in the period that there is not agricultural activities. They can stay in Seville, also in Madrid, but Seville is a key point of these treatment networks. And they go also to North Spain. You can see here in this map the main cities in which they are, I cannot say working, and also hardly living in these cities in Spain. they stay maybe 2-3 months in these different cities. And in each city has a liaison person to move them, to control them, better said. They cannot stay alone, they are always accompanied. And in the rural, in these rural settlements, we have detected that the presence of the women in this rural settlement is just around 5% of the total population living there. In Almería, we have detected around 150 rural settlements working in Almería. So we have another fact about from this research that the price of just for the land to build a shanty is between 100 and 150 euros, just for the right to build this shanty. If they are already built, the price is around 300 euros. As I told you, this research was made during the pandemic, and we are sure that the prices has increased. Now in this year, the prices for sure has to be higher. The place in which you can build your shanty is marked by the social structure and hierarchy that can be ruled can rule on the settlement. There are specific areas for the new arrivals. There are specific areas in the settlement for veterans, women's or veteran men's. The structure of this shanty is made of pallets and covered with plastic. And that's it. Some of the shanties has maybe most of the shanties at the beginning at least has like one room in which they can be sleeping and living and cooking. If you can pay a little bit more, you can have a second room just for sleeping, and over the years you can get you will be getting access to different rooms, a specific kitchen, a specific bathroom. Otherwise, you have to share this in this dramatic condition. You can be in a common toilet or just to do your necessities in the land, and these issues for women living in without electricity, without normalized water access, without rubbish collection, are specifically dramatic for women. The access for water, you have to walk maybe 1 hour to get your forget water that you can carry, and you are also depending on men to transport this water to your shanty. And this increases the vulnerability of this woman to suffer violence, and also the health condition, because they mix this water with toxic product used by the agricultural system, and we have detected these stomach pains and skin diseases, and also situation about cancer that they are not detected at the beginning. Also, the dependency for electricity to charge their mobile phones, for example, increase the risk for women to suffer violence. These young women to suffer violence. They give the mobile phones to men. They can charge in cars or on these car batteries, and most of the time they make copies of their contact, and they use this contact, this information catch from their mobile phones. They use this information to to extortion the women with the families in origin, saying what they are doing, etc. Even if the woman is not working, at Silvia explained at the last of the research, even if the woman has come to Spain just to work in agriculture and is not combining prostitution and agricultural works, but they are living in a context in which prostitution for women is the rule, so they can suffer also this extortion or this violence because they're a woman living in a place made for men's for prostitution. They are considered prostitute even if they are not working. They are not doing prostitution. They don't have access to gynecologists. When they have to abort, they don't have access to the public system. They have to go to clandestine system that increase also the risk for their health and for their rights, and also the mental health is directly impacted for the moral baggage and shame that they suffer, because most of them they belong into Christian communities and they don't talk openly about sex or about the situation that they are suffering. So this increased the mental health issues for them. They don't consume, we have been talking about that, they don't consume any drugs or alcohol or medicines. The consumption is quite low among women. And their relationship are mainly between women, mainly from the same place in which they are exploited. Sometimes they can go to different rural settlements, different shanty towns, and they have this relationship. Also, some organization, a few organizations work in this kind of places. But everything has to pass under the control of the controlling woman. Es decir, every access to this woman has been to be authorized by the controlling woman or the PIN, the proxeneta. So it's quite difficult the access to talk with them. We are detecting that the differences between first-time arrivals that are always accompanied. They don't have access to a documentation. That is one of the main dimensions of inclusion, this access to documentation. But when the women are more years in these routes, in these self-exploitation routes, maybe they get the residence permit or permit to work, and they can combine this prostitution with agricultural works. But so this is for veterans women that are still young, because as we saw, maybe they start these routes when they are 18, 20. So maybe when they are 25, they are considered like veterans, and they get this access. But this also increase their risk, because when they feel veterans, maybe they try to discuss with the controllers, and this, we are seeing that the veteran woman suffers more violence and aggression by men because they feel more comfortable, and this increase also the risk. There are differences between rural sexual exploitation and the sexual exploitation in the cities, and they find themselves very shocked when they see the condition in which they are working. As you can see in the picture, maybe they are prostitute in this kind of places, but they have been previously in Madrid or Zaragoza. They are in different flats, clubs. So the prostitution in this kind of places is dramatic. We also know that the prices for each service is around 5 or 3 euros for each service, but that does not go directly for women. They go to the controller, woman. This manage this money, and but we are also detecting that some veteran women, are opening these kind of clubs, rural clubs, and they are managing this structure. They are also being part of this network, treatment network, as owners of these places. So just for conclusion, we detected that this woman from Nigeria, from Guinea, Equatorial Guinea, Conakry, or also for Ghana, has exclusion and suffered violences, gender violences, in all the dimensions. These are all the dimensions that we are working on. So they are the most vulnerable women that we have detected in our research. This is some phrases, because the important is their voice that is difficultly heard, but there are some comments from them that we received during this research. They are surrounded by people, by men all the time, but the lonely that they feel has direct impact in our conscientiousness, and the confidence that they have lost on humanity, and just to be on the street, because they have been assaulted many times, and the fear that they have are, I think, inimaginables, unmanageables for us. So this is our presentation. Grazie a tutti, and I keep at your disposal for any question. Thank you so much.
Grazie mille a te, Jesús.
Thank you, Jesús.
Una ricerca
a very insightful and interesting research. And it is clear that there is a system perfectly organized with a hierarchy, with the very clear passages, with the times and method perfectly organized for the exploitation and the segregation of these women. I have a question. Unfortunately, the audio of Alessandra is not that good.
Scusate, mi sentite?
Mi sa che hai avuto un problema di rete per qualche secondo.
Ora mi sentite?
Yes, I'm listening in Italian and English.
Ok. Ora mi sentite?
Sorry to the translators, because I have to speak too quickly, I think. Thank you to the translators.
Sono abituate.
They are very clever and very patient.
Le nostre traduttrici interprete, quindi io veramente
I was just saying that you mentioned some constant
hai parlato a un certo punto di fattori
some farms where these women try to take water from nearby farms. So what is the distance between these shanty towns and the farm? So how can live in these areas and how can they go on with their action having very close farms?
Yes, it's depending. For example, in Almeria, I told you there are 150 different settlements. So it depending on the situation. It's very common to walk 1 hour carrying your drink containers. But there is a common issue that is the negation, the negation of the authorities, local authorities, to put some drink water points, fountains in this rural settlement. They don't want to put these fountains close to the settlement because they consider that it is a cold effect. So if they facilitate the access to the water to the people living in this condition, they think that there will be more people living there, and this is crazy. This is crazy because you don't put water nearby near these points. The vulnerability of women and the people living there is the only thing that increase the vulnerability, not the number of people. People is not coming because they know that there is a fountain in this point. People is coming for another reason. But as I told you, these distances from the water points increase the vulnerability. They depend from men for every step that they can give. If they can go to the town for just to buy some food or to buy something, they need a man that carry them in a car because they don't have, of course, they don't have any car or any other kind of transport. They are depending of men for everything. All of the situation.
Sorry, there is an observation. If we consider the Nigerian community, do we have to consider the cultural weight of you try to explain the women victims of trafficking that the UU shouldn't impact on the migratory project?
Leggo più lentamente perché forse per le interpreti.
So I repeat, if we consider the Nigerian community, it is important to consider the cultural importance of UU. How can we make women victims of trafficking to understand that they shouldn't be influenced or impacted by this ritual and that this ritual shouldn't?
I think I'm not a specialist in that, but I think there is like sometimes it's a kind of syncretionist. It's a mix a mix of thoughts. This voodoo practices, of course, impact, but with the mix of this sense of guilty, this because some of them also belongs to Christian community. That I think there are different beliefs that affect, of course, the voodoo that comes because it impacts in their economic situation. Maybe it's a push factor, but there are, I think, maybe other colleagues or you have different opinion, but I think it's a mix of beliefs.
I would like to confirm what Jesús was saying, because in the south of Italy in particular, we have seen a situation in which women were victims of trafficking. They were continuously under threat of voodoo rituals. A possible solution, well, it is very difficult to say this is the solution. One of the possible solutions is that if we take into account the religious aspect, the cultural aspect, the feeling of guilt they have, well, if we take into account all these elements and if we involve the linguistic and cultural mediator in this phase, well, we can do something, we can help. And of course, this intervention should be limited to the arrival. It is a constant monitoring, a constant support to the situation. It is a constant communication and dialogue with the person to explain, to understand, and to clearly perceive also the cultural and religious aspect. But as you were saying, Jesús, it is very complex because there are many elements to take into account. And sometimes also with the professional operators, it can be difficult, can be very challenging. And sometimes if we do not have the right approach, we could give the problem a different nuance. And so it is extremely important to consider religious and cultural aspect. I think that we can conclude with this principle that there isn't the solution, there isn't a single solution, but we need an integrated approach made of different kind of intervention, listening and cultural mediation, but also support, constant support in accompanying these women to become independent also through the work, through the reconstruction of an identity. I totally agree with you. We need an integrated approach made of services, made of specific intervention, focus on a work with these women and for these women. Thank you very much. We are slightly late, so thank you. Thanks to our guests, thanks to the participants for being with us until now. Thank you, Silvia Spinuso. Thank you, Cheikh Gueye, and thanks, Jesús Fernández, for your valuable contribution to our webinar. And we meet next Tuesday at the same time. And see you next week. Thank you.
Grazie.
Grazie Alessandra, grazie Cidis, grazie Jesús e Cheikh.
Grazie.
Thank you all.
Grazie mille. Grazie a tutti. Arrivederci. A presto.
Arrivederci.